Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and joining me today is Truitt Taylor. And Truitt is an enthusiastic speaker. He is a 12-year cancer survivor, owner of the design and build firm Taylor Construction and Design, and co-founder of Beauty and the Builder. So after spending 10 years in corporate education, Truitt left the corporate world to start a woodworking company out of his garage. Within the first 5 years, Truitt turned his small garage-based company into a multi-million-dollar home renovation business. Along with running Taylor Construction and Design, Truitt speaks and inspires communities on entrepreneurship, life after cancer, and mental health awareness. In 2023, Truitt and his wife, Claire, combined their careers and created Beauty and the Builder. Beauty and the Builder is an Atlanta-based nonprofit focusing on serving the community with skincare, self-care training, and providing essential living items and assisting with home maintenance. And we are going to get into that. In addition to his design and build business and nonprofit, Truitt enjoys personal training and spending time with his wife, Claire. They live in Atlanta, Georgia, with their two dachshunds, Gus and Griffey. So welcome to the show, Truitt.
Thanks for having me, Melissa. Great to be on.
I am so excited to have you on. And when we talked before, I lived in Atlanta for 5 years, but it was a long time ago. And apparently a lot of things have changed and a lot of things have pretty much stayed the same.
Yeah, I love the city here. We actually moved from one side of Atlanta to the other in the past 3 years. And other than the traffic, we absolutely love Atlanta with all the restaurants and just the culture here. It's a little bit of everything, I would say, just depending on how far you go in each direction. So um, every weekend seems to be filled with something fun, or there's always something new to try in Atlanta.
We loved it while we were there. We said I used to say it was a great place to be single, or not even just single, but not having any kids. Like we
Yeah.
really wanted to go to someplace a little more suburban when we decided to have kids, but we absolutely loved it when we lived there. It was so much fun. And yeah, always something to do.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the 285 perimeter was, kind of like being on the Autobahn. I don't know
Oh,
if
I
it still
know.
is.
I think everybody has a 285 story in Atlanta where they've missed their exit and have rode around the whole perimeter at least once.
And trying to keep up with people going 100 miles an hour, and that's like trying to keep up because that's what everybody's doing.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into this. We've got a lot to dissect. So, sure, take us back to 12 years ago, and you were young. So 12 years ago, you were even younger. So, kind of take us back, and how were you diagnosed? How did it come about? All the things related to that.
Yeah, it was 2012, and I had just experienced like a big breakup in my life personally. And I thought I was just gonna start over, start fresh. I had purchased a new home, my first home actually, in Smyrna, Georgia, and I had all these plans laid out for the rest of the year. And I had been into a lot of like amateur kickboxing and things like that in the past, and I was having a little bit of abdominal pain. And I remember going to my doctor and saying, "Hey, I'm kind of hurting in one area." Finally, went to him and told him that, and he was like, "Well, worst case scenario, may have Crohn's disease." And I remember just leaving the place mortified because I'd never even had a cavity before. And he's talking about you may have a disease. And so he's like, it's probably nothing. Let's do a colonoscopy. We'll take a look at that. And so I had the colonoscopy and I woke up and I'll never forget the words he said. He said, "Today's not going to be a good day for you. I'm pretty sure you have cancer. There's a large tumor in your colon. I couldn't even get the scope past it. And you've probably had cancer for years." I was like, it is just never. I mean, I was 31 years old. So never, you know, I was completely healthy. I eat right. I try to train right, all those things. Like I said, never had a cavity before. And then someone telling you that you have cancer.
And that
So
was the first thing when you woke up from your colonoscopy?
yeah, like full of propofol, right?
Oh
They
my
give you during the
gosh.
colonoscopy. And I was like, just the words were playing over in my head. I was like, did I really hear what I just heard? And so, yeah, I got that news and it was just like it was a shock. Probably like when everybody gets the first cancer diagnosis, they don't know what does that mean, right? Like it's like that you're almost in denial in a way. Like, how can I have this? I don't feel like I have cancer, but then what does cancer feel like too, right? So all these things you're trying to like figure out, right? So he asked me to see another doctor, to have like another type of scan done just to double check. And so a week later, after I went home and told my family, hey, the doctor thinks I have cancer, everybody was in disbelief. And so when I went to the second doctor's appointment, they actually came with me, and he confirmed then that I had a very large tumor in my colon, and that that basically had colon cancer for almost 2 years and didn't even know it.
So, and I don't want this to sound gross or anything, but I mean, you had said it was a very large tumor. Like, were you having any elimination issues? Like, I would imagine stuff trying to get around that tumor to be eliminated.
Yeah, so I was noticing some discomfort every time I went to the restroom, but nothing that was alarming to me,
Hmm.
I would say. The frequency, I think, had increased as well too. And so what they had told me was basically you kind of go through, you know, constipation bouts and everything else. And so that's like, I guess I didn't really pay attention to it as much.
It
And so
wasn't that out of the ordinary.
yeah, so with the
Okay.
tumor being large, I didn't feel it like on my abdomen or anything along those. It was a little tender, I'd say, when I pushed on it. But when you know training, working out, and everything else, you're always sore somewhere, right?
Right.
So it was nothing that kind of caught my eye, I would say. I would say something that I did notice, like hindsight, like I would say the stool consistency is kind of what caught my eye a little bit as well too. Um, there was a little bit of discoloration, and I think that's part of like the tumor, and as gross as this may sound, right? But there was
I mean,
almost
we're
like
talking about colon cancer. It's going to
right,
be a little gross.
right there it is. But there was almost like a film every time I had a bowel movement, like in my stool. So, but I just again something that I would say you just like that's odd, but it wasn't like you didn't have the education to know that's like a big red flag. So apparently that was part of like the tumor just like shedding itself a little bit every time. And so
And
um,
31-year-olds don't
at
get colon
31 years old,
cancer.
right? So no one in my family had cancer. Like my grandparents, but they were in their 80s, right? Like, and so that's not uncommon, I would say. But no one with colon cancer, no one with any digestive issues or anything along those lines. So how would I even think that I would have colon cancer, right, or
Right.
any kind of cancer? So, but yeah, the doctor confirmed that, and then laid out the next steps of what my life would look like. And so that was in July of 2012. And later that month, I had a colon resection where I went to the hospital. They removed a foot of my colon and several lymph nodes in that area. And so I remember laying in the hospital bed, and an oncologist came in, and she's like, "Hey, we got your results back from the surgery and the lymph nodes that we tested, and we found cancer in 4 of the 16 lymph nodes that we removed, which means cancer could have spread, which means now you're going to see an oncologist and go through the whole radiation and chemotherapy
Mm.
process." So, you think that you can, colon cancer, if detected early, is one of the easiest cancers to, you know, survive. So, but when you don't catch it is when it can linger and travel to places like your liver and your lungs first, typically. But no wonder I had to do the chemotherapy and stuff. Like that's again, I'm 31. I'm thinking like this is a disease for like older adults, right? It's what you should think of. But no, 31, perfectly healthy, every other way, and then now I have to deal with just this diagnosis. And so laying in the bed after a big surgery, I've never broken a bone, nothing like that, and here I am having like a foot of my colon removed and in a hospital bed for 5 days, can't move, morphine drip, all those things. It was a huge shock to my system for sure.
I bet. And I mean, now it's becoming more and more common in younger people.
The age
And
of screening was 50 years old. It's down to 45 now, and they're trying to get it even lower than that because the prevalence of colon cancer has just skyrocketed so much.
Yeah, and I don't know. I haven't really done any research. I don't know if you have to see if there's anything coming about as to why or, behavioral changes or anything that's causing it to come at an earlier age than it used to.
Yeah, there's a lot of research I say going on with that, and a lot of the research is more towards healing. They actually can diagnose the tumor, and there's a lot of different types of chemotherapy they can give you based on the tumor as well. But no one's pinpointed exactly what it is. But I mean, in a way, it's probably more of like the food consumption and stuff that we have, like that issue. I would say right now, or for the past several years, of what's actually in our food and how is our body like actually handling those things and stuff. But that's just an assumption. I was like, there's no like hard scientific evidence behind that, but it seems like that's that's probably a good indicator, a good marker for sure.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that I mean, and being a chiropractor by trade, like I was very much trained in more holistic type of health and getting to the cause and prevention. Preventing something is so much easier than dealing with it once it's diagnosed. So dealing with all of that and the fact that, I mean, there's like, we don't know what causes it. And every cancer has different risk factors, it has different causes. And we talk about being healthy and exercising and eating right and not being stressed and, all the things. But for somebody in your situation and some other people that I've talked to, like you can still do everything right and
Yeah.
and have all of that and still get cancer. So then it's like prevention becomes that much more difficult because we don't even know what causes it. So how do we prevent it?
Yeah, I remember laying in the operating room, and someone almost walked up to me, and I remember them saying, like, "What are you doing here? Like, you don't look like our normal, colon cancer patient." I was like, "I don't know. I'm just here. Like apparently it's worse than we think, and let's get this tumor out." And that was a wild experience for sure.
I have one of my closest friends was diagnosed with colon cancer. She just passed 3 years, and she was anemic. Her iron was really low, and that was the trigger that they said, well, let's just do a colonoscopy just to make sure. And boom, she had stage 2 colon cancer. Just, she was anemic. That was the only symptom that she had. So it's just insane. Like, how do you find these things when everybody has
Yeah.
different symptoms and, none of it's the same?
Yeah, this just the diagnosis of colon cancer. It's scary. I remember when I started my chemotherapy in the room, it was me, a bunch of like 70, 80-year olds, and there was 3 30-year olds in there though.
Wow.
And we were all kind of like looked at each other like, what are you doing here? I would say. And I watched, it was in a way, it was a little encouraging to know that someone your age was in there with a similar situation. And, but it was also, the talks were out where the doctors were saying like, why are we seeing this so much in younger patients now? That was part of the topic of conversation 12 years ago. And so I think just all the evidence and everything from then has really highlighted the awareness of colon cancer in younger adults.
At least to get screened and to look at, possible symptoms and get things checked out. It's unfortunate that, yeah, it's still so much older before you can even get screened that, insurance will pay for. It's the same thing with breast cancer. Like it's still 40 years old before get your first mammogram, and breast cancer is becoming more and more in younger patients that they have no clue.
I think, and just like anything else, when someone who is famous gets a disease, it tends to get more attention, right? So I think when a lot of people saw Chadwick Boseman get colon cancer, um, I think that was a big like eye-opening experience because he was younger as well too,
Mhm.
and he didn't make it from his diagnosis, but we literally had the same exact diagnosis, and so it's I tell people like all the money, all the everything that you possibly have, the best doctors, like, it doesn't really matter sometimes, I would say, when it comes down to that. That disease can really just get out of hand the longer you let it linger and stuff. So I feel very grateful and very fortunate. I'm sure we'll talk about that just to be here today,
Mhm.
because that's the hard part about having cancer. It's everyone when they get diagnosed with cancer at some point in time. There's a question that we ask ourselves, right? And it's usually, "Am I going to die?" Right?
Yep.
And that's a question that we all, I think that's a very natural human response, because when we think of cancer, we think of death sometimes. Like, oh, they got cancer, they passed away, right? So, but when you're in your 30s, you don't think about your life ending in your 30s, I would say. So that's like it's a question that you ask yourself way earlier in life, which I feel like can have a lot of positive benefit on your future, though. When you start looking at your life like, hey, this could be it. And there were definitely moments through the chemotherapy and radiation journey where, I'll be honest, like I didn't even. I remember telling my mother, I was like, if it's going to be like this every time I take chemo, I don't want to do this. Like, it is awful. It's there's no way to describe chemotherapy and radiation unless you have it. Just the level of like fatigue and sickness and discomfort. It's unlike anything that any cold or any kind of stomach virus or something along those lines you ever had. Like, it's just your whole body is almost feels like it's working against you with the chemotherapy. I mean, imagine you're attacking all these like fast growing cells. So it's like you're kind of poisoning yourself just to eliminate the worst part of what's in you. And it's a different experience. And so I think of like anybody going through chemo and stuff like right now that may be listening to the podcast, that you have to take your moments where, yeah, you want to eat right, you want to eat all the things, you want to change your diet, you want all this stuff, but sometimes what made me not throw up was like a strawberry Pop Tart, and that was all I could eat. And so just go eat what you can eat when you can eat it sometimes. And if you eat a pack of Pop Tarts, you're not going to get cancer. Cancer's not going to come back from things like that, right? Like, but sometimes you try and do everything to prevent something from continuing to happen, because you may have think that, I think as human nature, think that we cause certain things to happen as well too. And I asked my doctor a million times, and he said there's absolutely nothing that I did intentionally to cause this, right? It wasn't anything that I took or ate or whatever else to cause this in my body. So it's, I think we think sometimes about smoking, right? Lung cancer, smoking, and everything else. Like, that's tends to cause more, opportunities to get lung cancer and stuff. But with colon cancer, I mean, I ate really well for the most part. But when you're going through it, like, just taking those breaks to like rest and not, because you always feel like you wake up fighting, you go to bed fighting every day, thinking that, if I can fight this off, especially I think as men, sometimes if we can fight this off, um, then I can get it to go away. But that's really not the case. Sometimes your body just has to recover and relax, and everything is chemo, and the combination of chemo and radiation together. It's, man, it's a life changing experience for sure.
And also, really don't compare yourself to other people who have gone through it. Because
Mhm.
I've talked to people, and I personally have not had chemo, so I don't even pretend to understand what it is. But I've talked to some people that, they went and they had their chemo, they took the weekend off, and then they went back to work and they were fine until the next chemo day. And then I've talked to people who, like, it just wiped them out for the entire 12 weeks. And neither one is right or wrong. And don't say, well, I got to suck it up and I got to do it because I saw that this person did it. It responds how it's going to respond in your body. And sometimes you just have to rest and let it do its job and not beat yourself up about it, because that just makes things even worse when you're fighting to survive,
Oh,
many
absolutely.
times.
Yeah, I think going through chemo taught me to listen to my body more as well too. And that was something that, hindsight afterwards, that like, life after chemo in a way. I've learned to listen to my body a lot more. Um, but yeah, it's some weeks like at the beginning, the first chemotherapy session I got was awful, and then it almost got better for a couple of weeks, and then towards the end it got a lot worse. So it just, man, it was just one of those flip a coin kind of things. But typically the treatment in colon cancer, the more chemo you get, the more it starts to kind of build up in your body, and
Sure, it's a cumulative effect.
yeah, so you start to get issues with it that you didn't have in the first couple of weeks and stuff too. But yeah, just that, and then the radiation. A lot of people don't talk about radiation as much sometimes, but the fatigue from radiation. I tell everybody that, I was used to being very active, but when I was finishing up my radiation treatments, I couldn't even carry my own groceries up the stairs, like up a flight of stairs. Like I remember stopping and sitting down, with 3 bags of groceries in my hand, and then taking a minute or two, and then getting back up and just to finish walking up a couple flights of stairs. Like it's that, you know, exhausting. The doctor would write a note for me when I was actually working in the process of, hey, you can go take a nap in his car in the middle of the day if he needs to. But yeah, it was exhausting. But,
Now, were
you
you
know,
doing them both at the same time?
so they split me up. So I did 6 rounds of chemotherapy, then I did 25 rounds of radiation, and then I finished up my last rounds of chemotherapy after that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I tell everyone I was cut with the surgery, I was poisoned with the chemo, I was burned with the radiation, and then I was poisoned again with the chemo. And that was where for me, after the radiation did the last several rounds of chemo were like the worst part for me. So, but on a physical standpoint, you can't stand up, you can't sit down, you can't go to sleep. Everything they give you gives you insomnia. Now you're like, I remember sleeping in like trying to sleep in every room I had just to new scenery to go to sleep at night, and everything I could do just to get some kind of way to relax, because you just kind of wake up every day and fight that battle again. I would write myself notes, like, where the shower fogs up when you're in the shower glass and stuff. I'd write myself notes in the shower, like just to remind myself, like, hey, you're going to be okay. And then like the next morning, I would see it again. I'm like, okay, it's a reminder, because
Oh my gosh, I love that.
I was there by myself, and so I remember just thinking, like, okay, if I can just kind of make it to the next day and make it, one little step ahead each day, then I can get through this, and getting past like the whole first round of everything. If I can make it through that, then I can deal with everything else that happens. So, but it's a lot of stuff that we hear about with chemotherapy and radiation, just cancer in general, is a lot of the physical side, right? Like kind of like wanting to know what to expect physically. And the nurses did a good job, and the doctors are kind of explaining the things like that. I think what's kind of missing sometimes is the emotional side of what happens when you go through, a traumatic event in life or a traumatic health event. No one really prepared me for the emotional side of what I was going to experience. And I know that's different for everyone. Everybody, goes through different scenarios or different thoughts when something like that happens. But for me, that was one of the most challenging things was, here I am like in this house all by myself, and now I'm having to go through this illness. And so, my friends can support me and ask me to help and everything else. But, when I lay my head down at night, it's just me and the cancer. And there was many nights for me, I've actually lost my younger brother about 4 years before that. And so I remember thinking, and I had several nights where I would just like cry myself to sleep thinking my parents are going to lose another child and how devastating that was going to be for them, that I wasn't going to get remarried, I wasn't going to have children, like all the things I wasn't going to experience if I passed away. And like that's really like an avenue you can go down. And I went there, I think that's a healthy thing though, sometimes to think about, like, hey, let's go ahead and think about all the worst case scenarios to get those out of the way. Um, I think you can go there, but you can't stay there.
Mhm.
And so it was good for me to think through all those things and not kind of deny myself the thought of like, what's the worst case scenario, right? Not that I could change any of the outcomes with that, but that was one thing that I remember was very tough for me. And all of my friends and a lot of people looked up to me as one of the stronger ones in the group, I would say sometimes. And so if it can get him, like, can it get everybody else? That
Mhm.
was something they would talk about as well too. So, but I think you do have an audience too whenever you are experiencing any kind of traumatic event in life. And you, whether you want it or not, you tend to have more of a spotlight put on you because you are experiencing something that most people aren't experiencing. So I think there's a lot of positive things that can come out of any kind of traumatic event in life, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or any other thing that you may have, where people can really get inspiration from you and watching you go through this. Um, because people connect with people who are real, I think, and authentic lots of times, and they see you going through this. They see you battling. They see you, barely walking out to your mailbox to check the mail. They know that you're going through that. Like it kind of eliminates some of the menial problems that we have in life, knowing that one of your best friends is going through cancer, right? And so I think it can really change the perspective on what's most important in life as well too. So being able to see the positive sides of that. I think people can learn a lot from watching other people go through things. And not that we have to put on like a pretend that everything's great when we're experiencing something bad, right? But I think it just connects us on a human level a lot more. Like, seeing someone, the sympathy you may have watching someone go through a diagnosis, and the encouragement you may get from seeing them like show up at an event where you didn't really want to go to, but they didn't feel like going, but they were there. So putting in the extra effort for that, I think it can really readjust our perspective in a lot of ways. And, I feel like perspective's reality in a lot of, in most cases. So however we're perceiving our relationships that we have with our family, our coworkers, our friends, ourselves. I think, watching someone go through, a cancer diagnosis, and a lot of people that I've met, some of the greatest people I've ever met have had cancer. And so their whole take on life is a lot different because what's most important has moved back up to the front, and they're
Mhm.
really focusing on those things versus some of the silly things we can get caught up in.
That I call first world problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, cancer is really the club that nobody ever wanted to join, but you do meet the most amazing people. And, I have had the most incredible conversations with people in doing this podcast. And I know for a while that you had a podcast as well, kind of similar to this, but yours, I think, was more focused on younger people, right?
Mhm.
Who were diagnosed and interviewing them.
Yeah, for me, like a part of the healing process was, again, I'm 31 with cancer. I didn't know anybody else that had cancer. None of my friends had it or anything along those lines. So I started a podcast back in 2013, I think.
Okay.
And it ran for like 5 or 6 years, I would say. And what I did was I interviewed cancer patients, survivors, and even providers as well too. Um, just to get the perspective. Like, I didn't have a community. I didn't want to go sit in a cancer group on a Thursday afternoon, right? Like, I wanted to have access to a group or to information whenever I needed it, which and podcasts weren't as big back then as they are now. But I wanted to have a community. So I basically created my own community of younger adults who had cancer. And I got to meet some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my entire life. Um, a couple who I'm still friends with today, and just really hear their journey. And it was all different types of cancer basically as well too. So I got to hear all those stories, and it was healing in a way for me to do the podcast. But I think everybody I interviewed, it was healing for them to kind of get those emotions and feelings, get that story out. So just like I said a little earlier, like just the connecting of each other together, going through an experience, I think was part of the healing process for everyone. It kind of helps move you through the grief cycle a little bit when we get stuck at certain points. So I did that for several years, and it really changed my life in a lot of ways, and kept me more grounded. Because when you get over a cancer diagnosis, a lot of times you want to run as far away as you can, from that ever happening in your life sometimes. And so I think it's easy to kind of like have something to listen to where you can bring that back into perspective. Um, and really hear real stories from other people. And so that's why I'm grateful that you're doing your podcast as well too. Like it's so great to reconnect with that community, because we all, there may be one thing I say today that gets someone through just the next 24 hours. And I think that's a great opportunity. And anybody that can do that, has the opportunity to do that, I think, just speaks a lot about you, and in particular of doing the podcast, but about us as a community wanting to help each other out as well.
Yeah, my husband asked me a lot. My husband did not deal very well with my diagnosis, obviously, and his answer is, your first one, just running as far away as possible. And he asked me probably more frequently than I would like, how can you talk about cancer all day long? How can you be around it all day long? Like he'd be happy if he never heard the word again.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, this is for one, my way of giving back. For another, it's I get to meet amazing, incredible people who have overcome so much. And I get to provide a platform for these people to share, their stories and get their stories out there. And I had somebody in a support group that I visited said, for every time you tell your story, you become an advocate for other people to either get checked, to share their own stories, or to be able to better deal with
Mm-hmm.
what is going on. And so I mean that's kind of what keeps me going with this. Like and I'm on the other side of, like, these are stories of inspiration, these are stories of hope, and it's really about giving that to other people versus sitting in the muck of, oh my god, is this ever going to be over, how am I going to get through this? And I mean that's part of the journey, but being who I am as a person, like I like to focus on the silver linings, the blessings, and hey, like how is your life like more amazing now than it
Yep.
was before because you went through this trial?
I think, again, when we get that diagnosis, fear automatically creeps in, right? Because
Absolutely.
we're unaware.
And it's
And I think,
normal.
yeah, absolutely. But I think talking about it, being able to talk about it, means you're not afraid of it. And hearing people discuss cancer could give hope to other people out there that you don't have to be afraid of this diagnosis, right? There is fear in the unknown. We all have that, but like, you don't have to be afraid the entire time you're going through this. And so I think that's a huge, just thing to consider. If you are in the middle of a cancer battle right now, you do not have to be afraid every single day. There's a community out there. There's people that want to talk to you. There's people you can listen to that have been where you are and understand where you're at and where you're going, and you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to walk through this alone.
Right. And there is the saying that, both can be true, that it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be a both and. So you can be afraid and brave
Yeah.
at the same time. It's not mutually exclusive. You can be both, and that is perfectly normal and okay. You don't have to be totally black or white, either or.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, gosh, you have so many emotions. Like, I mean, there's so much worry, right, that we have going through all this. And even after the fact too, like, once I got the kind of into my chemo, I got towards at the end, and I didn't have to take any more chemotherapy. And then you like, well, now like what happens, right? So like, what do I do now? And everyone's biggest fear is that 3 month or 6 month, PET scan or CAT scan or whatever it is that we have to get. And every 6 months or every 3 months, that fear creeps up again. You're going to get the same diagnosis and stuff. So, or it's going to have something reoccurring or whatever else. And
Well, they even have a term for it. They call it scanxiety.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
real thing for
it is a
sure.
real thing.
Um, because, I think it's almost like a post-traumatic, type of event, right? Am I going to have to go through all this again? And whenever I finished, my chemotherapy in 2013, I just the recovery phase, like in itself, it took a full year to like for my body just to recover,
Wow.
and 32 years old, turning 33 that year. So it's like, man, it was just a whole recovery process, and just all of your, from your hair to your skin to your, your digestion to your activity, and also too, like just your mental health as well. Like you just went through something wild, and you can't look at, no one could look at me and tell that I had been through cancer really. So it's, you're walking around with that. And so, that can become like your whole life sometimes too, like worrying about cancer and is it going to come back and everything else. Next thing you know, you wasted several years. And so when
And
I,
sometimes it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If
yeah,
you're worried about it all the time, you can a lot of times manifest it again.
yeah, especially like with gut health, right? Like if you
Mhm.
get worried, you have your gut health's all disturbed. Um, but life after cancer is one of those things that I think people don't talk about as much as well. And going through it, prevention, going through it, kind of getting past it a little bit. But then, what is life like afterwards? And for me, as bad as that moment was in life, my life has been just as great afterwards. And I will say that there's not many months that go past that I don't have some sort of survivor's guilt. I would say that's a real thing too, on the opposite end of it. There's several people that I spoke to that are no longer here that were on the podcast and stuff before that I did. So, but there's several people that are as well, right? But I, there is a survivor's guilt that kind of like, why me? Why not somebody else kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's a question that you'll ever be able to answer, to be honest. There's really there's no scientific explanation to that answer, I don't think, or anything.
Let's just say
Um,
God and I are going to have some conversations when I meet
yeah,
you.
very much, especially when I go up there, right?
Yep.
So um, I do, everybody has like a different thing that they maybe like lean on or focus on and stuff too. But something that was really important to me, like through my diagnosis, was my faith as well. There was a certain scripture that my mother had written out for me, and I kept it on my bathroom vanity every day, and I actually still have it to this day. And it's the passage that says, "I will not die, but live and declare what the Lord has done for me." And
Mm.
so every day, I just would say that. I would say that. I would say that. Until I believed it. And the way, for me, God has used that point in my life, to affect so many other people. It kind of fulfilled that scripture for me in my life and stuff. So life after cancer, it's just getting back to what's new. But for me, it helped me eliminate a lot of the selfish decisions I had made in life, even from like my career, like, climbing that corporate ladder, trying to do everything I could possibly do to get higher and higher and do those things just for myself, or just to make some more money or whatever that is. Like, I started eliminating those things. Some of the relationships I had in my life, I eliminated because I felt like they were just selfish relationships that I may have had, or decisions I was making. I really tried to focus on, like, honestly, like what God had called me to do in my life and how I was going to live the rest of my life for that. And so I remember I got a call from my oncologist after one of these scans, and she said, "Hey, got bad news. There's a spot on your liver, and we think it's cancer again. And so you're probably going to have to go through everything again. And we're also going to have to remove a portion of your liver." I was like, oh my gosh, like couldn't have had a worse phone call. And so, um, there was moments of that. So I had to go get that biopsied. And in the meantime, I got back to like dating, I would say, in the city here. And so I went on several dates with several different people. And there was one person I had met, and she had a group of friends. And I don't know how we all got connected, somehow on through social media. But one of her friends was actually a member of this church in Alabama. I'd never met this girl before. And I noticed that she was doing a program through her church. And so when I got that news from my doctor, I didn't want to tell everybody. I didn't want to worry all of my friends. I told some close people and some family, like, "Hey, guys, I got this. Unfortunately, it looks like it came back. We're going to have to go through all this again. but I'm just praying that that's not the case. And then we'll have to move on from this. And so I told like a couple, like 5 or 6, probably friends, I would say. And this girl I told, I didn't know, but I saw that she was very, impactful at her church. I was like, hey, I don't know you. You're from Alabama. I'm from Georgia. If you could get everybody in Alabama praying that we have a different outcome for this, that'd be great. And she's like, yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of weird, probably, like hearing from a guy that you'd never met before or never spoken to. But we had that conversation, and then we had one conversation over the phone, and I was in no mood or mindset to like flirt or like do anything along those lines. Like, this girl didn't even live in Georgia. And so I reached out to her, and we talked for a little bit, and then I got a phone call from my doctor, and she said, hey, good news. It was a benign tumor. A lot of people have them. We just thought because of your past case that you may have, the cancer may have came back and looked like something else. It's not. You're perfectly healthy. Go on and live your life and everything. And so talk about a relief, right? So first phone call was to my mom to tell her, hey, good news, But the second phone call was to the girl from Alabama. Her name was Claire. And I was like, okay, I don't have cancer. Now I can turn on the charm. And I invited her over to like, actually, it was in December to take her on a date. And we went out, we talked. We spent the whole evening just talking. And we had the best conversation, I would say. Long story short, the following August, we got engaged. And then in the following January, we got married. We've been married a little over 8 years now. So,
Wow, that's
yeah,
awesome. Congratulations.
thank you. So, good things can happen after something bad happens.
There you go.
And I think that's something that's really important for everybody to know. Like, um, you know, there's so much more life to live. And look, like keeping it real, like let's say that it's cancer is the last thing you experience in life, right? There's so many things, so many people that you've impacted the entire time and everything else. And you can rest well knowing those moments have happened, I would think. But everybody on the other side of that, there's so much more life to live, and there's so many more great things to happen. All the things I was worried about, like when I was upset at night trying to go to sleep, never happened. Um, and so I've gotten to experience a great thing. Like, I changed my whole career. I went the whole entrepreneur route, betted on myself, and that was a wild journey as well too. But that's worked out, great as well too. So here I am with a great career, a great wife, a very happy life, and I'm able to have an opportunity to share my story, to encourage other people. And so I don't remember being happier probably than I am right now. So there is definitely greatness on the other side of a cancer diagnosis.
I love that. Well, a few minutes we have left, I want to talk a little bit about Beauty and the Builder. So tell us kind of how that got started and what you guys do.
Yeah. So my wife and I decided to combine our careers. She's a nurse practitioner here in Atlanta in the skincare industry, and I'm a general contractor. So we were talking about, what do we want to do together? We have polar opposite careers.
Yeah.
And so how are we going to, we love to, we have a very big heart for generosity. We love to give and love to do things for other people, especially in our local community. And so we were just sitting on the couch one night. I was like, we'll start a nonprofit. And then we were like, okay, we got all excited about that. And what do you want to call it? And then I don't know if it was her or me. One of us came up with the words Beauty and the Builder, because she's the beauty part and then I'm the builder part. And so we came up with Beauty and the Builder, and we started that in 2023 and in January. And just the way it's grown the past couple of years has been absolutely amazing. I get to see my wife go into, there's unfortunately the sex trafficking community in Atlanta is one of the largest ones in the United States. And so there's a nonprofit here called the House of Cherith. It's part of the City of Refuge here in Atlanta. And so the House of Cherith actually is a safe haven for women who experience that, where they can get rehabilitated and stay there and live until they have a whole program they have. and there's 30, 40, 50 women in there, constantly. And so I get to see my wife go into these rooms with all of these women who haven't taken care of themselves maybe as much based on the lifestyle they were in, but also when they did get like dressed up and everything else, it was to go out and work, unfortunately, versus like we would just to go out and enjoy ourselves for the day. So, seeing her helping them, educate them on skincare and self-care. And my sister actually helps with that as well too, just to, from like the spiritual, emotional side as well, like to see them go and do that. And it's been amazing. And on the builder side, like, I get an opportunity to build a lot of homes, things like that here in Atlanta. And, people all are always giving away like ovens, washers, dryers, all those things like that when we're doing these larger renovations. So any opportunity we get to give those to people, or take a moment and go do something out in the community, we try to do that as well too. So yeah, it's called Beauty and the Builder. The website is beautyandthebuilder.org, and people can donate online through that if they want to as well. And it all 100% of the proceeds go to everybody we serve here in Atlanta. And it's just been such a great experience, and I'm really grateful to watch it grow. My wife just created a new board recently and stuff, so it's about to grow exponentially over the next year. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for people out there that need help and assistance, and we love being a part of that and leading the way.
Oh, what a beautiful thing. Sex trafficking is very real. And I love that there's, like there's life after cancer, there can be life after something like that. And that there are people like you that are helping, these women and to be able to get through all of that. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. So last question that I ask all of my guests. So having gone through everything you went through, what is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's just starting on this journey or is kind of in the midst of overwhelm of a diagnosis? What is one piece of advice that you would give to that person?
Take a second to realize this is just a chapter in the book. It is not the entire story. It's not the entire book. It is a chapter of your life. Look around at the people that are around you, and they're in this chapter with you. They're this part of the story, but it is not defining you for your entire life. It is literally just a portion of your life. Sometimes we can overwhelm our lives with like, this is the way it's always going to be, no matter what traumatic event we go through. But it is only a small portion of your life, even though it may seem like the largest, most consuming thing that you have going on right now, and it can dramatically impact everything in your life. It is literally just a chapter in the book. So you will get through this chapter and you will get to the next chapter. So just have faith and focus on that.
Perfect. I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Truitt, for being on the show today and sharing your story. And I have the Beauty and the Builder website, Taylor Construction and Design website, and your Instagram information that we're going to put in the show notes. So if anybody wants to reach out to you or find out more information about Beauty and the Builder, they can do that.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
All right.